Only an honest death will cure you now.
Hey guys, it's Bokrug here, back with another video 6 months after my first one, but that's alright. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of an Ableton tutorial just for beginners, because I'm not super advanced with Ableton. And I think that's something that would be pretty useful, seeing as, you know, most of these tutorials out here are for like really advanced. So we're going to make 4 synths today, or synth patches, which you can all download in the description below as well if you want to take a closer look at them. So this first patch I'm using Wavetable, and as you can see I've just jumped to the Formant Wavetable pack and switched to the Vowel Wavetable, AEIOU. And I'm making pretty much like a kind of grimy dubstep kind of a bass using LFO for movement. And a theme you're probably going to notice throughout this video is that really the key to sound design, especially when you're a beginner, is just experimenting and playing around with different values. And yeah, so you can see for my OSC2, my second oscillator, I've decided to use graphite. And this is because I really like the sound of graphite. It adds a lot of harmonics and a lot of harmonic movement with the use of LFOs, so it makes it really good for dubstep. Now you can see, okay, so if you have 2 oscillators that you've already used for adding harmonics, when you're doing this kind of synthesis, you may want to add a sub underneath the sound. And to do that, you just click the sub button to the left there on Wavetable, turn the tune up and turn the gain up a bit. So after a bit of processing, this is what you'll pretty much come out with. Oh, this is what I came out with. You can see what I actually did to it in the description below by downloading. So not too shabby for a grimy dubstep bass, especially an old school kind of vibe. But now I wanted to do something a little bit deeper, kind of deep dubstep kind of feeling and vibe, because I've been really producing a lot of that recently, as you can see at my my Soundcloud link in the description, shameless plug. So as you can see here, I decided to use Operator, and I chose my algorithm, which you can see in the bottom of Operator just to the right. And an algorithm is essentially how you are applying different operators to each other, which is a very complex form of synthesis, which you can find out more by just looking up other YouTube tutorials and stuff. I'm not here to get into the details when it comes to Operator, but yeah, I added an LFO and I'm just playing with the EQ now. I added an LFO which is modulating only the filter, because the actually modulating the rest of the synth made it a little bit unpredictable, and I didn't really like the sound of it. So you can see I raised the cutoff on the high cut there, and that was because I didn't want to get rid of harmonics if I changed the frequency, or if you guys change the frequency, because with a low frequency it sounds really deep and nice, and with a high frequency it sounds extremely really deep and nice. And then if you raise the frequency, it adds a little bit more of those harmonics into the movement, which you might want. So here's those sounds now. So that's the deep one. And of course that's the one if you raise the frequency cutoff on the actual filter in Operator. So now I decided I'd do something a little bit different for you guys and show you how to really quickly make a pad in analog. Now this didn't turn out amazing, it's not some crazy pad patch or anything, but it is a relatively simple pad that a beginner could kind of make and put together. And you'll see if you download the actual rack in the description below and install it and take a look at it, you'll be able to see exactly what I did by going through all the different parameters. And yeah, so what I've done with this pad, one thing with pads is that to add a bit of space and a little bit of, to make it more wide and feel more girthy, you can detune the two oscillators. So, and it just kind of adds that kind of space to it. And if you then if you add some LFOs, you can add some movement. But with this particular one, the LFOs aren't really audible in the actual final track I put together because I just didn't end up using them that much. I ended up using it as like a slow stab. And one thing you can, what you'll find with this rack is that it sounds a little bit dub techno-y, and it's not a very good dub techno pad, but for a beginner kind of level, it is a useful one to just take a look at and find out how that kind of a pad is made. So you can see I added some reverb. I didn't really play around with the reverb too much because I thought it sounded good as it was. But here's one thing I can show you. So if you go to MIDI effects and then to chord, you can basically make it so that when you play one note on your keyboard, it'll automatically play a series of notes and make it into a chord. A favorite of mine when making dub techno is to do the 3-5-7 in chord, and that will make the kind of classic dub techno chord sound. And then if you just add some delay at a higher interval than maybe you would normally, or even at just a normal interval for delay, but as long as you add a lot of delay with quite a lot of feedback, you'll get that kind of dub techno kind of vibe. And so I added chorus here and I turned it down. I didn't make it too violent because I didn't want it to alter the sound too much, but I did want to add some of those harmonics. So here's that sound once finished and processed. There you are, not too shabby. So for this next sound, I decided I was going to do something I haven't really tried before, which is making a kind of droney, really slow-moving pad using wavetable. Now, wavetable synths, I've heard are really good for this, so I thought I'd give it a try. You can see me detuning and tuning the oscillators just a little bit, so it adds that space I was talking about and makes it, more deep and more depth of tone. So I was looking for some good wavetables. I ended up deciding to stick with the Beauty Vox because it was like slow and it was nice. And for the first one, I ended up sticking with another relatively simple wavetable. I didn't want to go too distorted and horrible. You can see me applying some filters here and adding some LFO movement. The LFO is actually, I think I cut out me changing it, but I started at it being 1 bar, but as it was in 150 BPM, that felt really fast. So I ended up moving it to 8 bars, I think it was, for the full movement. You can see me also adding the same classic 157 thing, because it would fit in a track with the other pad. So I also added a sub using chord. This is another trick you can use, is add -12 on one of the shift knobs in chord, because then what it does is it essentially will just take the note that you played and play it again down the octave. So it's very useful in that way if you want to add some kind of bass frequencies to the noise that you're creating. I did also, you can see if you can just scroll back there a little bit and just rewind, because I ran out of footage. But the compression's quite hard, and I did add some extra EQ on the end. But you can play around with that and see what it's doing if you download the thing in the description. So yeah, that's not too bad of a sound actually. It sounds like something I'd actually use in my ambient music. So here's me just quickly arranging the final track. Now, none of these, well, the pads were made to go together because they're playing the same chord and they're both on F. The basses are also in F, but they're not really supposed to go with the pads. So the final song doesn't sound amazing because the sounds aren't very coherent, but it will show you kind of what you can achieve with very little time. This only took me a couple hours of just playing around and messing around with just default synthesizers, no presets and anything like that, and just some somatic samples, and you can make something all right. So here we are.
Only an honest death will kill you now.